Welcome everyone to another one of this series of discussions of post ministerial meeting, MC13 ministerial meeting discussions that we're hosting here at the Friends of Multilateralism Group, FMG Geneva. My name is Cristián Rodríguez-Chiffelle. I'm a business scholar and fellow at the David Rockefeller Center for Latin American Studies of Harvard University, and most importantly, of course, a member of FMG, the Friends of Multilateralism Group Geneva. We are going to talk today about investment facilitation for development. We are, graced today by the presence of, two of the really the most important people within this initiative, and that has, accompanied it throughout the years. First, we have with us Mr. Karl Sauvant, who is a senior fellow at the Columbia Center for Sustainable Investments, and of course, also the former director of the UNCTAD Investment Division. And also with us today, Ambassador Sofia Boza, who is the ambassador and permanent representative of Chile to the World Trade Organization and other international institutions in Geneva, and also, very importantly, the co-chair of the Investment for Development facilitation for development initiative at the World Trade Organization. So with that, we'll start the discussion, and I thought that we will structure the discussion maybe because I haven't seen much said about this. We could take a little bit of time in going about the history of investment facilitation for development at the WTO. Maybe take sort of a third of our time on that, and then we'll make some points in terms of what are the benefits, why should people actually join this initiative, and of course we'll wrap up this discussion on the current status, post the ink of the agreement in the late last year, and of course the happenings at the WTO ministerial in Abu Dhabi, and most importantly, what is next. So with that, Karl, maybe you could take us a little bit through I wouldn't say ancient history, but a number of years ago, maybe around 2015 or so, when the discussion actually, in a previous capacity, of course, we worked together starting this investment facilitation for development discussions in Geneva, and how can that took us all the way through the agreements at the Buenos Aires ministerial, and then we'll give it to Sofia to take us to present day. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Christian. Well, as you said, it's ancient history, but actually, it's not that ancient. Um, as you made reference, the idea was born in 2015 when I had the chance to introduce it in an E15 task force on investment facilitation, task force on investment policies. And we were looking at that time at the future of the WTO and what should be done. And it was actually an effort which was done by the World Economic Forum and the International Center for Trade and Sustainable Trade and Development. And you were actually a co-host of that particular task force. So that was 2015 only. And I'm mentioning that because the agreement itself, or the text of the agreement, was really finalized in November of 2023. So this is an extremely fast process of arriving at an international agreement. It moved from the E15 into the WTO. Our former colleague Hamid Mamdouh, who was a director of the services and then investment division in the WTO, moved it forward in the WTO. I had a chance actually in January or February 2016 to make a presentation to the WTO of the report. We had the Chinese DG and the the Chinese DDG, Deputy Director General, and the German Deputy Director General attending that briefing. And then it moved forward in the WTO through a Friends of Investment Facilitation that I think met the first time in the spring of 2017.
That's right.
And then in December in Buenos Aires at the ministerial meeting, and a joint ministerial statement was issued to start actually the discussions of an investment facilitation agreement. And then from 17, it moved forward very rapidly to conclusion in November 2023. And I think it shows very much how much really the majority, the great majority of the members of the WTO are interested in a very technical agreement meant to help countries attract foreign direct investment because they're looking towards foreign direct investment to advance their development.
Thank you very much, Karl. And I think it also speaks to the fact that the conversations of quote unquote initiatives and soft conversations that are, hosted between academia, civil society, delegates, of course, governments, businesses, etc., in Davos, sort of a in Geneva, sort of a multi-stakeholder conversation, actually have results. Many times in Geneva we think that we meet and we only advance through talks and else, but many times, of course, this sort of like structured conversations on IFD that started around 2015, as you say, rapidly were adopted actually by the members, and in the end, only 8 years after, we're inked actually into an agreement. So I think the value to the Geneva conversation, it's very much still there. Sofia, maybe you can take us, Karl sort of left us, in Buenos Aires, late 2017, this was, taken, and picked up by governments, by delegates, by the WTO, as a plurilateral, advancement at the WTO, by members. And you can walk us, from where you actually picked this up as Chile, of course, Ambassador Matthias Franke, and if you asked before him, and you finalizing the agreement, maybe take us all the way to November 2023.
Yes, well, first of all, thank you very much, Cristián, for your kind introduction, and thank you very much to the Friends of Multilateralism for the invitation. Well, in 2017, as Karl said, a group of WTO members, the Friends of Investment Facilitation for Development, presented this initiative as Buenos Aires, and they are started as a dialogue, as a process of structured discussions, and that process changed to negotiations in 2020. So it started the negotiations based in text, in different proposals from the different participants, but also taking as reference other agreements, elements from, for example, from the Trade Facilitation Agreement, or also from the GATS. And after months and a couple of years of discussions, of negotiations, in December 2022, we had a first draft of the agreement. So there we announced that we concluded the substantive negotiations, but there were still some pending issues in some proposals to be discussed in the annex of the draft agreement. So the conclusion of text with an annex completely cleaned and a stabilized text was in July 2023. So just a few months ago. And after that, we started a process of a legal review of the agreement, and later on of a review of the different translations, because as you know, in the WTO we have 3 official languages, and we have negotiated in English, but we need also the agreement in Spanish and French. So in around November 2023, we had the agreement ready with a legal scrubbing, so a finalized agreement, which is what we have announced in Abu Dhabi a few weeks ago. And then in around January, we had all the 3 versions ready. So as Karl said, considering what entails a negotiation with this huge amount of members, because right now we are 127, it has been quite quick, the negotiation. And I think that has been because we all shared a common objective, and we all shared the intention and the willingness to engage and to move on together and to look at solutions when we had any issue in which maybe we had different opinions, but there was always the willingness to find solutions.
Thank you very much, Sofia. And I think with that, we've run a little bit of the history of the agreement, but let's dive now, of course, into the substance, right? Maybe Karl, tell us a little bit, for maybe some people are joining that are not fully embedded into the content of the agreement. Tell us a little bit, why is it important? Why is it there, right? Tell us about the transparency, speeding up, procedures, of course, ensuring the special and differential treatment, technical assistance, and others. A little bit of what's in there, and then Sofia, I will follow up with also maybe you can walk us from what Karl is going to give us also. Why should people should join? Why should this be spread even to more than the membership that it has now, which is still, of course, very significant?
Just before I do what you said, Cristián, let me just add one more thing about the process, and that is that we have to recognize that the negotiations were so successful because they were extremely skillfully guided by the co-chairs, most recently Ambassador Boza and Ambassador Park from South Korea. I think to bring North and South together on these issues, which is sometimes a little bit controversial, is not an easy thing. Now, of course, they were helped by the fact that the agreement focuses entirely on technical matters. The more controversial issues like market access, protection, investor-state dispute settlement were explicitly left out and are also explicitly left out in the agreement itself. So all of this is not relevant for this discussion. Rather, it is, as you already indicated, the focus is on transparency, how to make, basically overall, how to make the investment environment more friendly for foreign and, by the way, also domestic investors.
Of course.
By making laws and regulations transparent, by making it clear how the administrative process should go, by having perhaps a focal point where investors can go in order to get information or even to get help to get approvals. So transparency and simplification of administrative procedures and cooperation are, I think, to a large extent, the core of the agreement, but Sofia might have additional examples that one could add here. There is one more aspect I want to emphasize, and that is it's not only about more foreign direct investment, but it's also about better foreign direct investment. In fact, there is one explicit chapter in the agreement, and the agreement is publicly available now on the WTO website, thanks to Ambassador Boza and Ambassador Park. There's a whole section, a short section, but an important section on sustainable foreign direct investment or sustainable investment. And I think that's extremely important because it's the first time that within the WTO, this concept is being recognized. Of course, it could have been formulated in a much stronger manner if I would have to write the chapter. But of course, in international negotiations, only so much is possible. But it does make reference to some of the important international instruments in this area, like the Ruggie principle on, the business principle of human rights, on the OECD guidelines and the ILO declaration. So that's a major achievement.
Sofia.
Well, I think Karl explained very, very well from the qualitative point of view. So I will take the quantitative point of view as I'm an economist. And there we have proof of the high benefits that this agreement can bring. I can recall the research that was just published by IDOS, in which they see after modeling that this agreement can bring around 1% of GDP increase, which is huge gain from an agreement. And that increase on economic welfare, on GDP, is expected to be higher, especially in LDCs and developing countries, which is especially important. And that gains in terms of GDP and welfare will be also for those countries that do not participate on the agreement. Of course, not in the same amount, but also for them because of the synergies that this agreement will create and the improvement of the environment in which foreign direct investment decisions are taken and in which business work. So we have proof that this agreement, when implemented, and that's why it's so important to look at the next stage, which is going to the implementation. We have proof, concrete proof, that this agreement can bring very significant gains in terms of economic welfare and economic growth, which, of course, right now, considering all the geopolitical difficulties and that every government is looking at how to make the economy grow, is very, very relevant.
Thank you very much. I think we got a good call for action in terms of, you know, why many of the countries which are still not in the agreement should join. But maybe you can take us actually, Sofia, to that, right? We sort of went all the way up to November 2023, where the agreement was finalized. Since then, more countries are joined. I believe now about 3/4 of all the WTO membership, 120. How you will tell me how many have now ratified the agreement, and of course that took us to Abu Dhabi, you know, where there were some expectations in the agreement. Some were met, some weren't. So maybe you can walk us a little bit through sort of the status quo in the last couple of months, so we can also open then up a discussion with Karl on what's next. And I think that what's next will have a component of course, you know, yes, additional membership, ways to adoption into the WTO agreements and else, but also implementation. You know, how is it really going to be useful, right? In the end, you know, how does it differentiate with other agreements that are already in place that have some sort of the same measures and else, you know? So let's dive, let's take them one by one. But maybe you can start by walking us through the last, you know, very fun last 3 months since the agreement was inked in November 2023 in Geneva.
Well, what has happened in the last months, if we think since the end of 2023? Well, first of all, as you have said, more countries have joined the agreement. We are right now 127 countries that participate of this agreement. Much of them, more than 80, are developing countries. We have 27 LDCs participating in the agreement. So that makes this the GSI, the Joint Statement Initiative at the WTO, the plurilateral initiative at the WTO, with a higher number of members and with more developing members, which shows the common interest and the pro-development impacts that many countries believe this agreement will bring. So we are 127, and we presented at the WTO, first of all, through an event that we had the 25th of February, right before the official start of the Abu Dhabi conference. We presented a joint ministerial declaration in which the ministers of the participating countries, they recognize, they endorse the finalization of the agreement. That, as I mentioned before, we have one agreement that is finalized, and we have the agreement in English, Spanish, and French. And they, as Karl said, they also made public the agreement to anyone. So anyone that wants to can consult the agreement and all its content right now in the WTO website. And right after that, all those members presented a request for the incorporation of this agreement at the WTO legal architecture. And I will explain very briefly, because maybe there are some people that can hear this interview and they say, but you have negotiated at the WTO, but this incorporation, what does it mean?
I think please take as long as you want, because I think this is the central topic. So please,
this is central, yeah.
Please run it for dummies, because this I think will be very informative to people.
Well, I will explain it for dummies because I'm not a lawyer, so it's how I explain to myself. So I will explain it that way.
You're too humble.
Well, as you know, usually negotiations at the WTO are multilateral in the sense of that everyone, all the 166 right now countries participating in those negotiations, and all of them, especially at the ministerial conferences, endorse those negotiations and accept the results of those negotiations. However, since its very beginning, the WTO has recognized the possibility of the existence of plurilateral agreements. It means agreements that in which the participants are not the entire membership, but a group of the members. If you go to the WTO agreement, the Marrakesh agreement, you will find a couple of these agreements still there, as the government procurement agreement, for example. However, those plurilateral agreements, if they have been recognized by the WTO since the very beginning, but those that we have in the Marrakesh agreement were started with the WTO itself. Correct. But this IFT agreement would be the first time that a standalone plurilateral agreement, because as I have mentioned before, 3/4 of the membership is participating, but not the entire membership. So the first time that a standalone plurilateral negotiated agreement tries to be incorporated to the WTO agreement, to the Marrakesh agreement. And for that, we need consensus. So we do not need only the consensus from the participants, but we need the consensus from the whole membership. And of course, as anything that is the first time that we try to do in a so relevant organization as is the WTO, we will need more discussion to see how we can do that in a way that for everyone, because again, we need the consensus from the whole membership, those that have negotiated the agreement and those that haven't. So we need to look at how to have the consensus of the entire membership and how to accommodate the different concerns, so everyone is okay with this agreement to be incorporated in the WTO legal architecture through a specific article, which is Article 10.9, that recognizes the existence of the plurilateral agreements, but that they need to be incorporated by consensus. So the discussion that we have pending right now, after a request that we presented at the MC13, which unfortunately couldn't be solved there, but that we have presented again here in Geneva to the General Council, is the discussion about the incorporation of the agreement. So the text has been finalized, but we need to discuss its incorporation to the WTO agreement, to the Marrakesh agreement, because when incorporated, that will mean that we will have a new plurilateral WTO agreement. So with that, members, participants can start with their internal processes to ratify, and that will bring the entrance into force of the agreement and then the implementation. So it's a step that we need for the implementation in the future.
You think that's feasible to happen in 2024?
Well, we will do our best. That's what I can promise.
Karl, so you don't hold an ambassadorship, the WTO ambassadorship at the moment. So maybe I can put you on the spot a little bit more, and so you can tell us a little bit about the roadblocks and what do you see next steps here, and please be blunt.
Well, we made the point that the whole process of negotiating this agreement was very fast. And I think the challenge now remains, or part of the challenge is to maintain this momentum. And that means, I think, also with a view to get it integrated into the WTO framework, it means that one should try to get additional members on board. Three-quarters are on board, but there's still a number missing. So yep. I think it will be very important for the WTO and others to intensify or to continue their outreach program to bring other countries on board. And part of that, I think, will be to point out more and as convincingly as possible, the benefits that the agreement brings. Sofia mentioned the global benefits, but there are also very concrete benefits for countries. They can ask for technical assistance and capacity building. And for many developing countries, and in particular for least developed countries, that's very important to get international support to strengthen their capacity to attract foreign direct investment, which they are desperately seeking. So, that's one benefit. It's another benefit. This is a very concrete benefit. Another benefit is that the agreement is, if you wish, a commitment device, right? It says, I want to do certain things. And that might help in some countries to implement reforms that would make it easier for investors to invest in the countries. In the context of the European Union, if a country wants to do something and there is domestic resistance to it, the government says, oh, yeah, we understand you don't like it, but, unfortunately, the Commission in Brussels insists on that, and we have agreed to it, so we have to move forward. So that is, I think, for countries that want to undertake reform, that is an important exercise and an important help. And at the same time, of course, it sends a signal to international investors that countries are interested in facilitating investment and are interested in welcoming foreign direct investment. So I think to keep the momentum, it will be necessary to do more outreach, to bring in additional countries. But there is one more thing which I think is very important, and that is clear statement by countries in a position to do so, which means mostly developed countries, to say, we are prepared to provide the technical assistance funds that are needed to undertake needs assessment and to implement the agreement. And developing countries and least developed countries, most definitely, will need assistance. So I think one additional element to build momentum is actually to hear a commitment that technical assistance capacity building will be forthcoming, and perhaps to do a number of need assessment studies that would actually build up a group of countries that are saying, we are ready to do the full implementation if and when the agreement is integrated. Because if you have a number of countries that are ready to go and to implement, they know what needs to be done, they know that international funds are available to move forward, then I think it may put additional pressure and interest in getting the agreement integrated.
Thanks very much, Karl. All very fair points. There's of course another dimension of international investment that people that us, which are backgrounds of trade bureaucrats and trade diplomats and negotiators, I wouldn't say tend to forget, but tend to focus very much on the public side of things. But for international investment to be happen, there needs to be international investors, right? And then I mean, personally, I will say that at least recent experience with WTO, when we saw the trade facilitation agreement come to force, there was also a massive private sector, appetite for the agreement, and there were, trade facilitation alliances coming through, and there was a really group and decisive support for, parts of the private sector and the players to actually for that agreement to come through. What's your take on the international investment community from the private sector side on the agreement? Is it supported enough? Is there enough interest? If not, what can we do to bring them on board? Because at least I think that if you look at the trade facilitation agreement, I think the push from the private sector also played an important role in bringing the agreement to life.
We did a survey. Meaning the International Trade Center and the Inter-American Development Bank, did a survey of investors in Latin America about what would they think about various investment facilitation measures. And we listed quite a number of the ones, not all, but a number of the ones which are in the Investment Facilitation for Development Agreement. And there was certainly strong support. By strong, I mean over 80 or 90% of respondents who said, yes, this would help us in our locational decision-making. So clearly, to the extent that we have systematically reviewed the approach of the private sector and international investors to investment facilitation, there is support. But there is also more. Your former employer, the World Economic Forum, is ready to launch the equivalent of the alliance they had to implement the trade facilitation agreement, namely to have an alliance to implement the investment facilitation agreement. And I think if the World Economic Forum would do that, that would certainly bring in more of investors in terms of following up and actually achieving what the agreement seeks to achieve, namely to bring more foreign direct investment to developing countries.
Sofia, any comment there?
Yeah, well, I absolutely agree with everything that Carl said, that we have the certainty that what is in the agreement is something that the private sector is looking for, because Carl mentioned some of the previous studies and of the data that we have in that sense. But it is true that we need to work on more engagement of stakeholders, including private sector. And I think right now that the agreement is public, that will help for that engagement from academia, from private sector. So one of the tracks in which we want to work in the upcoming months is more and more on outreach efforts, but not only directed to capitals in the sense of ministers of trade or of investment or foreign affairs, but also to private sector and academia, to show them this agreement. Also, we want to approach more the media to make this agreement well known, and because even though we have this pending conversation about the WTO about the legal incorporation, the agreement is ready. The agreement is finalized.
That's right.
So it's important that we present more and more to the outer world, out of Geneva, the provisions in that agreement, because it's brand new. We have presented just a couple of weeks ago.
Any other challenges? Let's move a little bit to implementation. What kind of challenges do you foresee? And let me, of course, we're going to leave aside that this agreement touches, Karl said it very well, specifically technical. So the elephants in the room are being, very purposely left aside, such as, disputes and else. But of course, many governments, for example, have a certain competency at the federal level, but you also, you need to, investments are pushed many times, in a specific location that also may be subnational, competencies, and the agreements, how much of an impact will an agreement have on that. I would just say, if you can just walk us through, some of the hurdles that you still see, even with the narrow approach of the agreement that we'll have to face, and how can those be bridged? Maybe Sofia, you can start, and then we can take it to Karl.
Yeah, I think you have mentioned something very important, Cristian, and I remember from one of the pilot projects on its assessment that have been undertaken already. That country mentioned that during the project they could see that one of the challenges, but was also an opportunity, was a coordination, in the sense that they saw that there were a huge number of different agencies from different ministries, from different government levels, that were involved in investment, in foreign direct investment. So, but the needs assessment project allowed them to put them together for the first time. So I think that's a challenge that can become an opportunity, and they are the projects that Karl has mentioned, and have also that parallel track on a more needs assessment project. Technical assistance capacity building is very necessary, because as in many things in the public sector, coordination is something always challenging. However, this agreement has been thought in a way that that implementation adapts to the pace and to the rhythm, and how each country can do it in an appropriate way. So we have taken care of that. But if you ask me, what we have heard from the first projects is that coordination is something difficult at the beginning, but this can bring an opportunity to do so.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you hit the nail on the head there, because the agreement needs to develop in terms of what's addressing, right? Of course, again, leaving disputes and other the things aside, still the facilitation of investment permits, right, or the or addressing the investment climate, which were somehow addressed by the agreement and discussions, but not with the depth that an investor would like to see. For example, I think it's something important and something that hopefully the agreement will evolve on. Maybe Carl, you also have a comment on this question.
Yes, I think you're focusing on a very important issue, namely all the range of issues surrounding implementation. And we have to recognize that the implementation of an investment facilitation for development agreement is a bit more complicated than the implementation of the trade facilitation agreement. The trade facilitation agreement basically deals with issues at the border. But investment, of course, investment, foreign direct investment is much more intrusive, and it involves all sorts of aspects over the whole lifetime
That's a
of
great
an
that's a great point.
project. So it's much more complicated. And then you also made reference to the subnational level. And we know that there are hundreds, thousands of subnational investment promotion agencies or agencies that are tasked with attracting foreign direct investment. So I think all of these things have to be kept in mind, but it can be done. We have done it already in Ecuador, and we have already initiated investment needs assessment in a number of Caribbean countries, members of the Organization of the East Caribbean Community. So it can be done. It requires an effort, and it is helped by something that Sofia just mentioned, and it's an important aspect of the agreement, and we should really point it out very clearly. There is a clear special and differential treatment section in the agreement.
Correct.
That allows countries to self-designate at what speed it wants to implement what measure. Literally, what speed, what measure. It can say, we are ready in this, we have already done it, and many countries have done many of the things which are in the agreement. We have already done this. For this, we need a year or two. And the third category is, we can do that, but we will need technical assistance in order to do that. I think that's extremely helpful in terms of helping countries to implement the agreement, because as Sofia mentioned before, you only benefit from the agreement if you implement it. And of course, therefore, the focus, as you just pointed out, Cristián, on implementation is extremely important. And the needs assessment in this respect is just going to establish what kind of assistance do you need for what.
Yeah, and I think maybe something which is a little bit untapped there is the partners that you can have in some of these countries for implementation, which should be the investment promotion agencies, right? They should have a really active interest in developing this agreement. And I've seen, at least in my professional practice with the Boston Consulting Group, a really dismal capabilities in terms of what the IPAs are doing with regards to investment facilitation. Some of them are very much on board and they understand the disciplines and what disciplines, but topics that let's not say disciplines because then we run into different things. The topics in which the investment facilitation agreement helps, and they're already working towards implementation. Some other IPAs have no clue. At least is what I've seen. So I think maybe leveling the playing field in terms of investment promotion agencies, how can they support implementation in countries, could be something that will be very well addressed by some of this development work that is supporting the implementation of the agreement. We're almost running out of time. I would like to maybe provide you some space for some parting words for the discussion to each one of you, and maybe just frame a broader question for those thoughts in terms of how is it. I mean, we had different discussions on the future of the WTO and what's next after Abu Dhabi and all that. But of course, the investment facilitation agreement is not set in a vacuum, right? It's set in a broader organization which is going through a tough time, and the IFD, even if it wasn't fully incorporated into the WTO agreements, is one of the success stories, right? That came out, at least with no mixed feelings, came out of Abu Dhabi, and it's one of the success stories that the work in Geneva is posing today. So maybe a reflection on how does this fit within the current statement and situation at WTO, and anything else you want to just leave us with. Maybe we can start with you, Karl, and then we'll of course give the last privilege to Sofia.
I think the fact that over 120 countries, out of 164 countries, have reached an agreement on a very important topic indicates that multilateralism can work and does work if it addresses issues that are of interest to a great number of countries. I think that's a very good sign. Now, the challenge is, can the WTO allow that a group of countries that want to do something and that want to do something that does in no way establish any obligations for anybody else can actually move forward and let this agreement on investment facilitation and for development be integrated into the WTO rulebook. I think this is an important test case for the WTO to see whether it can actually adapt to a world in which countries have different interests but want to come together under the roof of the WTO in order to move something forward. And in this case, we have an agreement that is led by developing countries, that is in the interest of developing countries. So all developing countries should really fully support it.
Yeah, please.
Yes, well, I think if we think about the ultimate objective of the WTO is through trade proposing new elements that can bring more prosperity, more economic growth, more development. So I think here, and what is very motivating about this agreement is that we have a concrete tool, a concrete proposal that has been proven that will have a significant impact on economic development. And also because of its elements related to sustainability, it will have also an impact on sustainable development. So I think that why we are so excited and why we want to continue discussions to look at how we can incorporate the agreement in a way, of course, that we respect the consensus rules of this organization and it's acceptable for everyone, because we want to arrive to the implementation of the agreement because we are convinced that we have a significant tool for development, which is, as I said, finally the ultimate objective of the organization. So I think the discussions about IFD will be one of the most vibrant things that will happen in the organization in the upcoming months. I foresee that. So I hope they will move in the correct way, but of course, respecting the sensitivities of everyone in the organization, but they will move in the correct way so we can get to the implementation. That's the final objective.
Thank you very much. I think you've both posed very well the fact that this is, of course, very relevant for investment facilitation, but it's also relevant for the WTO, to signal that they can move forward in such a fashion. So I think exciting times. I think, congratulate both, right? Congratulate you, Carl, for being an advocate, persistent, advocate of investment facilitation for so many years. I can only, imagine how gratifying it must be for you to be standing at this moment and seeing, that much of that work actually brought fruits, and we're at this stage that that of implementation. And Sofia, really, a lot of just congratulations and respect to you and your co-chair and previous co-chairs also of the initiative for exactly having developed such an agreement in for multilateral terms, particularly for WTO, in a short time, which such success, but also all the effort and strength to actually make it fruitful and to actually turn it into something that will, of course, develop in the end benefits for members of the WTO. I think I was planning to leave you just everyone with a picture here of of Abu Dhabi and the ministers there, signaling again the 127 members that are today members of the WTO, for all us to understand that this is, it's doable and we should keep pushing forward, which is the objective of FMG Geneva, which what we're trying to do, of course, is keep driving these conversations forward. And you'll see that many of my colleagues at FMG are also hosting, different discussions of different issues that came out from Abu Dhabi and that concern the future of the WTO. And I very much invite you to follow all those in the website and respective channels. So with that, Carl, thank you very much, Sofia. Thank you very much. And goodbye, everyone. I think from Connecticut, from Geneva, and from Patagonia in the south of Chile, all the best and hope to see you very soon. Bye-bye.